This time bringing you an update on Baldur's Gate 3 with some highlights for patch 5, a pretty massive change to the game, with the update itself being about 30 gigabytes, bringing us all sorts of things like a brand new epilogue scene that I think will tackle probably most people's big complaints with how the game wrapped up, alongside new difficulties, inventory management systems, and just general performance and bug fixes, of course. Now, a lot of these things I have been calling for personally, so I was very excited to see them in this patch, but in addition to those big things, there's also a ton of smaller things, like, of course, the performance and bug fixes, but even more specific things like there being a new fight in the endgame if you happen to betray Nightsong, being able to use Orin's outfit after you defeat her, or fixing the long-broken puzzle in Cazador's mansion that has literally not worked since launch. But first, let's dive into the big stuff with, of course, the difficulty settings. Again, something I've personally been calling for quite some time, which was either a more difficult way to play the game or a customizable difficulty. And they've went ahead and added both. For starters, we have Honor Mode, which is effectively an Iron Man mode, meaning you only have one save, which means you're stuck with decisions as well, as the game will auto-save over that one save, forcing you to deal with it. It also makes some gameplay changes, specifically to bosses, as they now have new abilities and legendary actions. The legendary actions were a thing for many of the monsters you might face in the tabletop version that we didn't see a ton of in the game before this, though there was a little bit here and there. And those things, combined with stricter adherence to the rules for the tabletop version in terms of damage bonuses, should make for a much more challenging difficulty. But that said, if you somewhat inevitably lose during Honor Mode, or you get yourself into a situation you can't reload out of, the game isn't necessarily over, as you can continue your playthrough from a custom difficulty. It simply won't be Honor Mode, and as a special reward for people who complete Honor Mode, you can unlock a golden D20 skin for the in-game rolls if you manage to beat it. Now, a lot of people have already, since this patch was dropped, been asking me about Honor Mode, so right here in this video, I'll tell you that they did not update the achievements for the game on Steam yet, but a while ago there were achievements that leaked over on GOG for this specifically, so once they make their announcements at the Game Awards and the Xbox release of the game, I'll see if they have any changes planned, but I would like to wait for them to deal with that achievement first before I go in on it, as I'm a little busy with Rogue Trader at the moment. But even if they don't add achievements for this on Steam, at the latest, I'll jump into it myself come January, once I've gotten a few other things out of the way, since January will be pretty relaxed for game releases anyways. But yes, it is something I will be doing for those curious about my 100%. Now, custom difficulty also introduces a bunch of options to, of course, customize the difficulty. I think this is great on both ends of the spectrum, both for people looking for an easier experience, as it lets you reduce a lot of things as well that the previous story mode actually didn't. So you can take it even farther in certain aspects of the game if you want to, or you can even make it more challenging, which is exactly what you'd want to see from a custom difficulty option. So as far as big wins go, the difficulty stuff here is great. It's exactly what I wanted to see. Kudos to them for adding it. Another big fan requested thing, including from myself, was the epilogue scenes. Now, it is possible to, after the story plays out, join an epilogue sort of interactable scene where you and all of your companions are teleported to camp, where you can discuss what they've been up to, what you've been up to, as well as receive all sorts of letters from various people, and it is a nice way to wrap up both what happens to everyone and you in a way that is infinitely more satisfying than the previous experience. But a couple of notes on this. One, in order to get this scene, you have to have chosen an ending that would give it to you. For instance, if you pick an ending where everyone dies, or you perhaps take over the world as an evil villain, obviously it doesn't exactly make sense for this scene to play out. Otherwise, however, this scene is really great at reflecting the choices you've made. I loaded up several of my 11 playthroughs to see exactly how this scene changed, and it was pretty substantial. Now, the only real criticism I have of this is that when I loaded up my Gale playthrough, the epilogue actually chose the wrong ending to his personal story. That is to say, it was different than the one I picked, but other than that one hiccup, it was a really great experience running through all these different options. Obviously, I don't want to spoil too much here, but I thought it was really cool and well done, and I think hopefully it will bring a lot of people the closure of the story that they were looking for, including myself. But needless to say, there's a ton of variations to this based on things like who you romanced, what the outcomes for individual origin characters' stories were, how those endings clash with yours, and Larian themselves describe it as the single most reactive piece of content in the game, and I'm inclined to believe them. But we're not done yet. One of the, I would say, biggest highlights for me is a long requested quality of life feature allowing you to access the inventory of other companions while at camp that aren't in your party, and thanks to this button on the bottom left here, you can now do that. Though again, I think this might have been where I was loading up an old save actually, but it only let me access one of my mini companions inventory this way. But that small hiccup aside, again, great change, very happy to see it. And then we have all the various performance and bug fixes. Now, the main thing I want to mention here is that this should fix the problem that was introduced with patch 4 that caused Act 3 to lag an extreme amount, like borderline making the game unplayable. So that should be knocked out, and then they also introduced a bunch of optimizations and things around game objects, memory utilization, that kind of thing that should make the game run smoother for basically everyone, but will be most noticeable for people with low amounts of RAM. Though, as I mentioned in my 100% review, the game as of patch 3 was running pretty flawlessly for me, but of course, further optimizations are always great to see. Now let's talk about some of the more miscellaneous changes. For starters, Minthara is now officially able to be recruited simply by knocking her out, and Halsin has gotten some new dialogue to reflect that you can resolve the situation without killing the goblin leaders. So it looks like the people who just really liked Minthara, myself included, got a pretty big win here, as she should now be able to be recruited without murdering everyone in the Druid's Grove without a very specific and buggy workaround. And while I am honestly a big fan of consequences to actions, in this case I think people were jumping through so many hoops to do this anyway that it was probably the right move just to give players what they wanted here. They also added more reactivity to your companions to the end-game choices, so as you're standing at the precipice, so to speak, the choices you make, etc., will elicit response from your companions now, which is just one of several changes they've made to many conversations over the game just to make them feel a little better. For instance, you can now talk to Maul at the guild hall about her deal with Raphael. They also fixed several problems relating to using disguised self at certain moments, including a very prominent one with Shadowheart and her main questline in Act 2. And then from there, they made numerous fixes to address various continuity problems, people referencing characters they shouldn't or are already dead, that kind of thing, fixing certain journal entries from doing things in a particular sort of way. But then they also made numerous changes to things like level design and lighting, etc. But in the case of the level design, I thought it was neat that they actually added a lot of loot and increased how good it is in certain in-game areas where sometimes the loot for doing something just wasn't very good. So that was certainly nice to see as well. But while there are many more changes other than the things I've just went over, many of them are incredibly specific. Though all in all, this is a fantastic patch with a lot of great changes. I think it addressed many of the major issues I myself had with a lot of things, and I would definitely say it's the most significant patch since they've launched, and it definitely improved the game in more ways than one. So with all of that said, fantastic patch. Looking forward to diving into Honor Mode for myself here before too long, but again, I do need to deal with some other things first. But by all means, let me know what you think about these changes down in the comment section below, which of course means to like, comment, subscribe, all that YouTube jazz. But regardless of any of that, truly, just thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. May you wander in wisdom and